Ruth chapter 4, verse 1. Now Boaz went up to the gate and sat down there, and behold, the close relative of whom Boaz had spoken came by. So Boaz said, "Come aside, friend, sit down here." So he came aside and sat down, and he took 10 men of the elders of this city and said, "Sit down here." So they sat down. And he said to the close relative, "Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, sold the piece of land which belonged to our brother Elimelech. And I thought to inform you, saying, buy it back in the presence of the inhabitants and the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not redeem it, then tell me that I may know. And there is no one but you to redeem it, and I am next after you." And he said, "I will redeem it." Divine providence is the doctrine of God's intervention in the affairs of human lives. The Bible is clear on this subject. God is both aware and active, working to bring his good pleasure to pass. The book of Ruth is a shining example of that truth. When everything fell apart in Moab, a rumor of bread brought Naomi back to Bethlehem with her Moabite daughter-in-law. Ruth went out searching for a place to find favor and found herself in the field of a near Redeemer, unbeknownst to her, who showed her great kindness. When we come to chapter 3, everything seemed to line up. All the pieces were in place. Everything that you could add up seemed to be pointing to the fact that Ruth and Boaz would be together, that their lives would completely coalesce. But then there was one thing that they hadn't accounted for, that Naomi and Ruth had missed, that there was a nearer relative to Naomi than Boaz. Was God's providence threatened? Or was this hiccup also a part of his plan? Now, this chapter perfectly illustrates that the bumps in the road are all prescribed. They're all important for us. So let's find out why. Verse 1 again. Now Boaz went up to the gate and sat down there, and behold, the close relative of whom Boaz had spoken came by. So Boaz said, "Come aside, friend, sit down here." So he came aside and sat down. He took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, "Sit down here." So they sat down. There is an immediacy to this text, as if no time elapsed between Ruth's departure and his venture to the gate. Boaz sought to directly complete this business that was before him, which meant he had to place himself where that business could be transacted. In any given city, the gate was the center of business negotiation. It was not simply a constructed swivel piece of furniture that separated the stranger from the person who lived there. It was a series of booths that you would walk through, almost a tunnel that would funnel you into any given city. So Boaz went down there and he sat there. He wasn't going to move. He was going to wait for this thing to happen. And he didn't know what was going to take place. Again, these characters, they didn't get to read the book in advance. They lived the life just as we are living it, moment by moment. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what the next thing is going to come before us. And Boaz didn't know. As he went down to the gate, he just knew this is where he needed to place himself if something was going to take place. He knew he needed to be in the right place, and he went there, and he sat there, and he stayed there until something took place. Now, this is a surprising fixture in anyone who's in Christian work. As many times, God's people relay a struggle with knowing God's will, wondering about what God is doing in their lives, and yet failing to prioritize what they already know will aid them. For instance, they know or should know that God speaks through his word. And they know that when they want to know something about what God requires, that it's there in the Bible that stands in their home, perhaps collecting dust. Now, at the same time, when they come and they ask and they say, "I haven't heard God speak to me," and the minister, myself included, and others would say, "Well, have you opened your Bible?" Well, no, I haven't opened my Bible. Somebody once said that if you want to hear God speak, you want to read your Bible. If you want to hear him speak audibly, Read it out loud. And that's how we hear God speak, and it's true. I've also heard many people decry a failure to grow and mature in their Christian walk, and yet cannot remember the last time they attended a meaningful participatory fellowship meeting where they were accountable to like-minded believers. If we're going to grow, if we're going to see God move, this statement before us illustrates the truth that the desired action will happen and will only occur when we put ourselves in that right place. And we sit there and we stay there. We remain in that place. Boaz wouldn't have had a chance to do anything else that day if he hadn't gone to the gate. He made sure he was there. He made sure he was there with his coffee. He was ready to wait. He was ready to hold on until this guy showed up, whoever he was. We're called to do what we know. We're called to do the parts that we are sure God has already called us to. Being in fellowship, constantly studying the Word. These are things that are lifelines to where we are going to grow and where we're going to know what God has to say in our lives. We need to discipline ourselves. We need to put ourselves in a place where we can watch the Lord work. And that's what he did. He sat down, he stayed there. And here comes this relative. This word, behold, the author writes, as if it's a surprise to any of us that have been watching this book all the way through. As if somehow we could kind of say, oh yeah, it's a coincidence now that here comes the near relative. But it's been happening the whole time. Naomi hears a rumor, comes all the way back. Here comes this little lady, Ruth. She goes walking, looking for a place to work, and she happens into the field. And here Boaz puts himself in the place where God can do the work. And what happens? This guy shows up. God is providentially working. Boaz is in the right place, and the near relative, who we are about to discover, had no real knowledge of the situation happened by. God did his part. The believer did his part, and God met him in that place. When Boaz began to talk with his relation, either an older brother or an older cousin, he spoke in a way that was common to business folk. They knew this language. This guy knew he is setting up a business deal with me. And the author here goes to great lengths to keep this man's name from being part of the public record. According to those with greater knowledge of Hebrew, Boaz literally almost calls him Mr. So-and-so, so as to obscure his name. The other man, I could just imagine, here you are coming up and you're probably trying to do some other kind of business. You don't know what's going to happen. And here comes Boaz coming to talk to you. And you know who Boaz is. Mr. Fleetness. He's fast to getting jobs done and whatever else. He's a guy that you can kind of depend on, and he calls you over. I just imagine the near relative thinking, my lucky day. There's something in it for me. I was just coming down here to get a permit or something, and now I might get something really cool. Boaz here, he gathers the elders of the city. These were the official judges, as it were. And he calls this meeting so it could be official and binding. Look at what he says, verse 3. Then he said to the close relative, Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, sold the piece of land which belonged to our brother Elimelech. And I thought to inform you, saying, buy it back in the presence of the inhabitants and the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not redeem it, then tell me, that I may know. For there is no one but you to redeem it, and I am next after you. And he said, I will redeem it. If you've ever watched the movie The Princess Bride, there's a point when the young kid is being read the story, and he hears that Buttercup just married, what's his face? I can't remember his name. Why did she marry the Dread Pirate Roberts? Spoiler alert. But anyway, the point is that the guy drops in and he says, wait a minute. He doesn't marry her. And then only to realize it's a dream sequence. Peter Falk says, you're not getting all crazy, are you? I could stop. This moment is one of those pivotal moments where you're reading, you're going, no, this is exactly what Ruth was afraid of. That this guy is going to step in here and say he's going to redeem this whole thing. This is not what we want to hear. And Boaz just lays it on him. He tells of Naomi's return. He tells about all this possession that Elimelech had to sell to keep himself afloat. And he wanted to inform the King James Version uses the word advertise its availability. He had the first right of refusal, and now it's in his court to reject or accept the offer. Boaz's presentation is very interesting. He focuses entirely on the property, which was the actual value of the transaction. He doesn't mention Ruth. He doesn't mention the necessity of raising up a child, an heir. As presented, this is a sweet deal. It's a discounted piece of property. There's a lot of potential in this for this relative. And it's no wonder he quickly pulls the trigger. He goes for it. He wants the land. He wants this to take place. And in that moment, he's pulling out the checkbook. He's got his little checkbook out. It was his. This is a win for everyone. He was so quick to answer, but Boaz, he hadn't finished. And I almost look at Boaz right now. He's got that look like Mel Gibson. He's just got to look like, he's hearing all the, oh, he's taking the land. Oh, wonderful. Look, he's got his checkbook. He's ready to do it right now. He's like, yeah, that's great. I just got a little bit more for you. Then Boaz said, on the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you must also buy it from Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of the dead, to perpetuate the name of the dead through his inheritance. Boaz just loved to do this. He sets people up like this all the time. He did it to Ruth earlier. I totally love you, Ruth. I'm so into you. I can't believe you're into me. I'm old. I'm Geritol generation, and you're a young woman, and I can't believe. I thought you'd be going for the young bucks. And look, you're coming to me. I can't believe it. Oh, you're such a wonderful lady. You're a woman of virtue. There's just one thing. There's another Redeemer beside me. He loves to do this. By the way, I've just got one little thing left to tell you. I can see Boaz just quickly moving ahead. He's got the title deeds in his hand, and he's saying with a pen in his hand, hey, congratulations on your new land and your new wife. Just sign right here. The purchase would now be obviously completely for the family, as any male child would be guaranteed the possession of the property beyond the man's life. In essence, the man would now take on the debt of the property until another man can be raised to take up the responsibility of it. And that presented a problem. This guy didn't want to do that. Look at what he says. As the close relative said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I ruin my own inheritance. You redeem my right of redemption for yourself, for I cannot redeem it. Now, this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging to confirm anything. One man took off his sandal and gave it to the other, and this was a confirmation in Israel. Therefore, the close relative said to Boaz, buy it for yourself. So he took off his sandal. Gross. Just thank God for contracts today. Signatures, handshakes even. From what we see, it's difficult to really ascertain what the real reason was for this man's refusal. There is a Targum. Targums are non-inspired Jewish documents which captured cultural paraphrases or expansions of the text that were shared in synagogues. They were orally transmitted. They were later captured in what are called Targums. There's one that mentions an existing wife, and that Targum reads like this: I cannot redeem it because I have a wife already, and it's not fit for me to bring another into my house, lest brawling and contention arise in it, lest I hurt my own inheritance. Do thou redeem it, for thou hast no wife, which hinders me from redeeming it. Of course, to bring another wife into a marriage, that is going to be cataclysmic. This guy was a fairly smart guy, if that was indeed the reason. It may also just be the reason that he didn't want to take on something that was going to be a debt and remove from his inheritance that value that would have to be paid into someone else's account. But before we move on, I want you to notice here the criteria that we discover from his response about being a kinsman redeemer and how valuable this moment is for us, how instructive it is for us as we consider things. First of all, the kinsman redeemer needed to be a relative. He had to be a relative. He had to be a close relative to be able to redeem land. Second, he needed to be financially able. He needed to have cash reserve. He needed to be able to step in and take on the debt of the property. Finally, and this is the part that we are catching here, he needed to be willing. He needed to be willing to do this. And that's the deal right here. That's the point that stopped the deal from progressing. Boaz is now in the clear. Boaz can do this. Now, I want you to understand something here. Boaz could simply have taken Ruth as a wife, run off into the night. Who's going to even think about it, right? Who's going to even challenge this? But Boaz doesn't do it. He's gone through this whole thing. He's risked it all. And now he is in the clear to be able to receive this officially. Now, this custom that they have, this exchange of sandals, it was a common practice of the people at the gate. And there are various thoughts on the reason for the sandal. Some have noted that the sandal pictured the walk of the Israeli, that it took place on God's land, and that as such, the land could only be owned secondarily. It wasn't really their land. They had walked in God's land. So the sandal was a representation of that. Of course, in my mind, I just think they wanted to get off on the right foot. But interestingly, there's a part of this transaction that was at the very least, if it did happen, it was minimized. Deuteronomy chapter 25, verse 9 and 10. It describes what is to happen if this thing that happened. For example, the spurned widow, once she discovered that the man did not want to raise up an heir for her house, the spurned widow would grab the sandal and then spit in his face and everyone would then call that man from that point on shoe untied. That was what was supposed to happen. So Ruth is supposed to go over there. She's supposed to grab the sandal. She's supposed to, hock a loogie in the guy's face. And then everyone's supposed to say, "You're the man whose shoe is untied." That was the custom. That didn't happen. That didn't take place at all. But Boaz, in fact, instead of insulting the man any further, moves right into this thing. Now, a quick note as to why. I think Boaz didn't want this man to pursue it any longer. He didn't want him to think about it. He didn't want him to be shamed into it. He wanted to make sure that he said no, and then he moved right in for the kill. Look at verse 9. And Boaz said to the elders as he pushes him aside, and all the people, "You are witnesses this day that I have bought all that was Elimelech's and all that was Chilion's and Mahlon's from the hand of Naomi. Moreover, Ruth the Moabitess, the widow of Mahlon, I have acquired as my wife, to perpetuate the name of the dead through his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brethren and from his position at the gate. You are witnesses this day." I am so impressed with the character of Boaz. Here's a man of privilege, a man who's quick to business deals. Here's a man who knows that he needs to be in the right place at the right time. And this businessman didn't take the low road at any point. When Ruth came and propositioned him in the sense of giving herself unto him as a partner in marriage, in the dark, in the quiet of the threshing floor, he didn't do anything untoward toward her. He didn't just run off and take her and go into some other land and go get married somewhere else and then come and bring her back. He went and did the right thing in the light of day with witnesses, going through the process that would be legally established in his day. For any of us that have business dealings, for any of us that have to do business, what a wise thing it is to take our cues from this man, to do it all above board, to not let there be anything that we do that shortcuts the process. What I've found about shortcuts in any area of life, what I've found about shortcuts is this: it's the long road in the long haul, every time. Whether it be learning something musically, trying to get fast before I try to understand the way the movements need to happen. Whether it be something in business or something with taxes or whatever else. Every shortcut that can be taken is a long, long detour. Let us be wise. Boaz did everything above board. He was in the right place at the right time, and though it was likely something he didn't want to do, it was probably bureaucratic, and it wasn't something that he wanted to go stand in line and do this whole thing, he did it right. Christians, live above board. Pay what's right. Do what's right in this world. Our witness is at stake, but things that are right in our life, if we don't want to go the long way, it's important to do it right. But here he is, and he confirms that he purchased the entirety of Elimelech's estate. And just think of Naomi's heart at this moment. Think about where she's come from. Here she was in Moab. She had gone out thinking that there was a life to be had out there, only to find out that she had everything she could have ever asked for where she was. And had she had stayed, had she had pushed Elimelech to stay here and wait it out and pray and see if God would do something. Instead of doing that, they went and they cut and they run. And here she comes back a decade later, and people are looking at her like, is that Naomi? Is that pleasant one? She says, don't call me Naomi. Don't call me that any longer. Call me bitter, because my life is bitter. God has treated me in such a bitter way. Those are her first words. And just imagine her at this moment, here in the last chapter, and she's standing somewhere nearby, and someone is transacting all of this on her behalf. She had no hope. She had nothing financially. She was a destitute woman, hoping perhaps to get some kind of favor from family and friends. And here she stands graced by another. I don't know if you've ever had somebody pay anything for you. I don't know if you've ever considered what that's like when you've been bailed out in some way by someone else. Could be financially, emotionally, whatever it might be. But what an amazing feeling to stand in someone else's riches. To be blessed by another person. You can only imagine. You and I have no real clue what this is like. To have been this woman, to have been just with no expectation of anything good. And here it's all taken care of. In one flail swoop. What a tremendous thing God had done on her behalf. And the property notwithstanding, the marriage of Ruth brought the greatest joy to her heart. And that now her family name would be continued, and it would be counted among the people of God. In contrast to the nearest Redeemer, who refused to buy the field on account of the bride. Boaz bought the field that he might take the bride. Ruth was not the deterrent. She was the reason for this deal. And it was all done legally. Nobody could come up and say anything. Nobody could go, hey, wait, a foul. This didn't take place the right way. All the elders stood there and they said, yes, we witnessed this. Look at what happens, verse 11. And all the people were at the gate, and the elders said, we are witnesses. The Lord make the woman who is coming to your house like Rachel and Leah, the two who built the house of Israel. And may you prosper in Ephrathah and be famous in Bethlehem. May your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring which the Lord will give you from this woman. The elders, the people they're just amazed at God's, what he's done. They get to celebrate with Boaz in this moment. They get to look at this great thing that the Lord has done. And they even bring to the recollection, they trace back to the way it was in Rachel and Leah's time, when Jacob fathered 12 sons through these two ladies. Genesis 29 through 31 through Genesis 30 verse 24 details the way in which the tribes came into being. If you want a very strange afternoon, I encourage you to read that. See what it was like and read the story of how they basically fought back and forth about who gets to be with Jacob tonight. And there's one baby born after another. And someone finds mandrakes and says, I've got mandrakes, I get him. Crazy story. But here these four ladies are involved, Bilhah, Zilpah, Rachel, and Leah. And God brings through them, through that crazy situation, he brings the children of Israel to pass. He brings them to bear upon the life. And the prayer here is not for a sordid repeat of that chapter, but that their union would be fruitful. The people of Israel, they never saw children as a burden. They never saw children as a curse like other nations had. Other nations had literally sacrificed babies to their gods because they were inconvenient, or maybe they were born with birth defects or whatever else it might have been. But Israel, God's people, looked at life and said, what a blessing, what a posterity, what a beautiful thing this child is. They pray that Boaz will rise to prominence among his peers. And Boaz, here, he's taking on the expense of a land and a new family for the sake of another family. That might drain another person. So the people pray that God would strengthen him and make his name famous for the sacrifice he was about to make. And finally, they recall the story of Tamar, who disguised herself as a prostitute in order to become impregnated by her father-in-law. That's a strange one to bless somebody with. May your house be like Perez. Now, Judah had been reluctant to give Tamar his last son, Shelah, because Tamar had outlived the two other sons. Now, this is a crazy story. Again, Genesis chapter 38. When Tamar realized that Judah wasn't going to give Shelah over in levirate marriage like we've been learning about here. When he was not going to obey the law, she took it upon herself to go and dress up as a prostitute. And when Judah came into town and there was a big sheep shearing going on, there was a big party happening, she tricked him into having relations. When Tamar became pregnant and it was beginning to show after some time, Judah, he said, bring her out here and we'll put her to death. But Tamar had been smart. She had kept his credit card. And she said, I'm pregnant by this man. Anybody know whose it is? And Judah looked at it. He's like, his heart just sunk and his face became ashen. And he realized, oh my, it was me. She was the one who was the prostitute. And you know what Judah said about her? You're going, how could this have been right? You know what Judah said? She is more righteous than I because she followed God's law. She sought it out. Now, they never repeated their affair, but that's how God, in this unconventional, unorthodox way, brought this line into pass. They're pointing back to a time when it worked, when the line continued because of levirate marriage that they were about to practice. And they spoke thus in the actual birthing of the child. This proclamation that they make is not so much about the ramifications that they don't know about, but they're speaking prophetically. There's going to be a child that's born out of this, and there's going to be this line that's continued because you have both followed God's law. You've both put yourself in the position to bring about God's blessing upon your life because you followed what the Lord has prescribed in His Word. That's what they're saying. Folks, let me tell you something. You will find that in your life, living according to God's law, the law of love, the law of liberty. Now, we don't follow the law as rules and regulations, but listen, we do respond out of love for Christ. And when we know that there are things that should be done and shouldn't be done, when we comply, there will be blessing because we're in those things, because we're doing those things. We're not just hearing the words and are thus being deceived. There are a lot of people who hear and know and have a lot of knowledge and have a very strong, trivial understanding of Scripture. But those that are truly blessed, those that are a blessing to others, are those that are doing His will, who are responding out of love for Christ. And that's what He's saying here. You guys are giving yourself to levirate marriage. This is what God's law has prescribed. And now there's going to be blessing out of it. Now you're going to bring something good. God's going to do something just like He had. Even though that thing to our mind, Tamar and Judah, to us, we're thinking, that's disgusting and weird and strange. And yet it was God's law so that the family could be perpetuated, so that He could bring life through it. They spoke of this couple having children. That's enough right there. That's like speaking, it wasn't a foregone conclusion in this ancient day. Boaz was older. How many girls would they have before they had a boy? Not like they're going to have all this time. They weren't like in the flower of their youth. But this person that they were going to bring was going to be famous in this land. This thing that they were going to bring about, this child was going to bring fame into their land. And how much do we know about Bethlehem because of their greater child, right? Verse 13, so Boaz took Ruth, she became his wife, and when he went into her, the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. And the woman said to Naomi, blessed be the Lord who has not left you this day without a close relative, and may His name be famous in Israel, and may He be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is better to you than 7 sons, has borne him. Then Naomi took the child, laid him on her bosom, and became a nurse to him. What a beautiful ending to a wonderful God-ordained match. Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. Naomi had this experience before. She saw Ruth marry Mahlon. But that experience was a little bit different, wasn't it? Because at that time, Naomi was a Moabite pagan. She looked at her daughter, and yes, her son was marrying somebody, and she was happy for the love and whatever, but there was an unequal yoke. Here was an Israeli with a Moabite. They didn't share the same faith, and so mom was, I love my son, but I can't really celebrate this thing because of how wrong it was. And here she gets the chance to see it all over again. God has done some radical work in Ruth's life here she is now, having this great moment, getting to see Ruth, her daughter, her true daughter, better than 7 sons, who's come to faith, who isn't just her relation by marriage, but has really been brought into the family of God. What a wonderful celebration she had to look at her daughter and to know that God had worked in her life to bring her to this point. I could just see Ruth's face on that day of her wedding because she's followed the Lord. She's trusted the Lord. She's gone down the right paths. And now there's joy. There's excitement in the air. There's excitement in her eyes. Can you see Ruth right now? Can you see her face? Can you see what a celebration that is? When God's people live the right way, when they go down the right paths, when they trust Him. This must have been an amazing time. Ruth had traversed national lines. She'd begun a new life with the Lord. She was now a woman after God's heart. And when they came together, the Lord gave conception. She bore a son. It was never guaranteed they'd even have one child. But when it happened, the Lord allowed the process to work. And she bore a son, an heir. And now Naomi, I can only imagine that day when 9 months later, after they've had their child, Naomi is the one who's just beaming at the possibility. I mean, nobody knows what's going to come out, right? There's no sonograms back in the day. Nobody could tell. I mean, I always find that some women seem to always know. Oh, that's a boy. That's a girl. Oh, you're having twins. I mean, somehow people just know that. Ladies especially seem to know. I never knew. I was wrong every single time. I had it wrong every time. I said boy, it was a girl, and vice versa. I never knew. They didn't know. But boy, Naomi, just on that day when the baby was born and she could hear on the other side of the curtain the crying of this child, her heart must have leapt like the day she had children. Her heart must have gone out of her chest, excited for what the Lord had brought into their life. And these women who saw Naomi come into town, they saw the beginning of the story. They had watched God work. They had seen that this woman had come in and she was 10 years gone, but she was 30 years older. And they've watched how God has worked. And here they stand to say, look at how God has provided for you. Look at what He's done. You know, isn't that interesting how sometimes we need somebody else to kind of point out, look at what God's done in your life. You know, I need that in my life a lot of times. I need somebody to stand up and say, have you noticed what the Lord's doing? Somehow we're oblivious of it in the moment. We don't really kind of figure it out until someone says, hey, do you remember what it was like about a year ago or 2 years ago or 3 years ago? And we're like, we were totally different people. She was ready to change her name to Mara, like legally. Don't call me Naomi. Don't call me Pleasant. And here the women are saying, look at what God's done. Look at what He's done in your life. He's provided you a relative and Boaz and a grandson that's going to bring back what's been lost. All that heartache, all that loss that you've endured. You're going to receive so much more for what you've lost. There was going to be great joy in this child, and it was a joy of repayment for all that she suffered. There would be joy in his youth as she sat there with him, as she taught him, as she took him into her arms. You know, people say that children are great, but grandchildren are way better. Imagine that, as she fed him candy and then sent him home. No, I don't know what happened. What a great joy. The blessing upon her was a source of rest for her, in the sense of now she could see God had been doing all this work and brought it to this conclusion, but it would also bring the rest for the rest of her life. The security that she would have never had was here for her now. And not to diminish Ruth at all. That was the biggest blessing of her life. Her decision. Listen to this, guys. One person's decision to walk in faith. One person's decision to leave behind a life of paganism, a life on the other side of the river. One person's decision changed everything for Naomi. The wonderful thing about God's plan in our lives and in your life. You will never know. It's very possibly true. It's potentially the case that you will never know what your act of faithfulness toward God will produce. One person, one woman in dire straits chose to follow after God, to leave it all behind and to trust Him going forward in a relationship with Him. And look at what happened. What a joy. Naomi took her grandmotherly place, raising him with the knowledge of the story that would be told for years, indeed is being told this very morning. Think back in time. Think back to that moment with Naomi on the rocking chair when this baby is brand new. And she's telling him this story. Listen, kid, I know you don't understand me, but here's the story of your mom. And here we sit today, listening to the end of it. And look at the end of it, verse 17. Also the neighbor women gave him a name, saying, there is a son born to Naomi, and they called his name Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now this is the genealogy of Perez, the first Mexican in Scripture. Perez begot Hezron. Hezron begot Ram, and Ram begot Amminadab. Amminadab begot Nahshon. Nahshon begot Solomon. Solomon begot Boaz. Boaz begot Obed. Obed begot Jesse. And Jesse begot David. The women who had watched Naomi come into town, it's interesting that they get the chance to name the child. Hey, go with this one. So far, no one has taken me up on my name for their child. I don't know why. I think it's a fine name. Frank or Francesca. Either way, it sounds wonderful. I don't know why all of you are so hesitant. But they called him Obed. That name means serving. And what a truth it is. He would serve to bring in the line of King David. From here, we're given all these names. We look at them and we're like, I don't know who that is, but it starts to clear up for us. As we start to see the names come up that we understand, that we know. Oh, we know Boaz. We know how important he was, and we know now Obed, and how that's a continuation of the line. And we've heard of Jesse, but then there's David, the king of Israel. So if the end of Judges, when the people of Benjamin, the tribe of Benjamin was spared, if that was left there to tell us about their line being committed, and that their king, Saul, had been brought to pass through that, here Ruth shows us that this purpose in telling us this was to show us where David came from. How David came to be, not just this great king of Israel who would be, but the descendant of the Messiah, Jesus Christ himself. Now, as we close, what an amazing, amazing story. Like Ruth, you and I were once foreigners, strangers to the life of God. We hoped simply for scraps of mercy and charity until we met Boaz, Jesus. His grace, kindness, and mercy overflowed toward us until we were overwhelmed by him. When we finally approached him, seeking his protective wing, he acted on our behalf. And he did not merely steal us away from the enemy of our souls, but in the light of day, standing before the elders of Israel, the Lamb of God took away the sins of the world on a Roman cross. As God incarnate, Jesus was our relative. Not having any sin debt, he was able. And having stayed on the cross until it was finished, he proved that he was willing to redeem us. Like the man who found the treasure in the field, Boaz bought it legally to get the bride. In the same way, Jesus paid for the sins of the world, and he bought the field so he could have the bride, you and I, legally and outright, paying for it all the way through, and no one can challenge that for eternity. Let's pray.